Good morning. The Board of Education meeting for February 1st is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2.03 is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All those in favor? The minutes have been approved. Item 2.04, establish agenda order, and the agenda will stand as published. Item 2.05 is recognitions. We have a presentation from Dave Kaufman, AACPS Coordinator of Music.
Good morning, I'm David Kaufman, Coordinator of Music, and I'm pleased to present this morning's board recognition. Unlike most recognitions, I'd like to ask you to remain in your seats for just a few minutes. Members of the board and Dr. Arlotto, we are quite proud of the music program we offer to our students at all levels in our school system, and of the outstanding musicians whose skills we help sharpen through the many opportunities that we provide. Nowhere is the quality of our musicians more publicly on display than the annual Baltimore Symphony Orchestra side-by-side concert, where our students get to perform alongside the talented and skilled professional musicians of the world-class Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. As those of you who have attended can attest, it is an inspirational event. Each year, one of our students is selected to perform as a soloist. This year, Chesapeake High School senior Emma Bauman, who is accomplished on the flute and piccolo, as well as jazz saxophone, was the lone student selected to perform a concerto on piccolo at the Meyerhoff in December. Now, I could tell you much more about Emma's talents, but we think it's better for you to experience them yourself. Please welcome Emma Bauman, who will perform Syrinx by Claude Debussy on the flute. After she finishes, please join us down front for a photo. Emma? join.
The highlight of the day.
That's right.
Like a week.
Oh, thank you.
Our next item is 2.06, Educator of the Month, Mrs. Hummer.
The board cannot officially recognize our Educator of the Month this morning without telling our audience about a fantastic nonprofit program that works in our schools to encourage preteen girls to develop self-respect and healthy lifestyles through dynamic interactive lessons and running games, culminating in a celebratory 5K run. The program is known as Girls on the Run, and our Educator of the Month is Laura Hoke from Pershing Hill Elementary School. When Laura learned about the program and its benefits, she took it upon herself to research the requirements and recruit staff members to attend the training and plan for the weekly meetings for 10 girls in grades 3 through 5. As a result, she initiated and implemented the first Girls on the Run running program at Pershing Hill. The organization's curricula seek to address all aspects of the girls' development to enhance their physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual well-being while establishing a lifetime appreciation of health and fitness. One of the activities of Girls on the Run is working with staff to tend the first grade butterfly garden, as well as train for the official 5K race in Baltimore. As well as heading up the Girls on the Run Club, Laura Hawk is also the collaborative decision-making lead, primary team lead, a member of the school improvement team, and a member of the leadership team. Her compassion, patience, and understanding make her a vital member of the school team and community. As a leader within the school, Laura works closely with administration, staff, and parents to make a positive impact on all students. As well as being a general education first grade teacher, Laura has a background in special education and is well-versed in meeting the needs of diverse students. It is because of her knowledge and skills that she's a highly sought-after team member and colleague. Laura has been observed in many different settings, whether she is in the classroom delivering general instruction, in an IEP meeting, or in a parent conference. She is always professional and effective. For example, when working with parents who are new to the IEP process, Laura ensures that she gives sufficient time and attention to questions that may arise, as well as providing additional resources. The same is true when she's working with her colleagues and her students. Laura, you are always positive and willing to collaborate in the best interests of your students and your Girls on the Run membership. You are proactive in identifying barriers and working with others to ensure that all students under your watch are successful. So for these reasons and more, the board is pleased to honor you as Educator of the Month for February 2017. Congratulations. Please join us up front. Congratulations. How did they get you here this morning?
So actually, you had to tell me because I guess I was supposed to go in January. I was on vacation.
Our next item is 2.07, Employee of the Month, Mrs. Nally.
Annapolis Elementary is an innovative school in a traditional setting. Although the building, over 100 years old, is the oldest public school in the state, it was completely renovated as of 2014. The facilities are state-of-the-art and gorgeous. And who is responsible for keeping this gem of a building shiny and gorgeous? Our Employee of the Month for February, Chief Custodian Justin List. Mr. List has shown great knowledge of the workings of this historic building. He has repaired, replaced, and redone many areas of the building that needed attention. He has organized closets by cleaning, painting, organizing, and making them usable for additional storage. If he spots an area that is worn down from everyday use of the building, he doesn't waste any time sprucing it up with a coat of paint. Justin List works his carpentry magic in every part of the building. When the physical education department needed more storage space for equipment, he put together some additional shelving that really made a difference. As more and more books became available to the school, Justin made display shelving in the reading room to accommodate the vast number of books. The server room also received his attention with the addition of shelving to lift machines off the cement floor, making the room more accessible for repair people. But perhaps Justin's most special accomplishment was the amazing refurbishing of a PTA-donated bench in honor of a former student that sits proudly in front of the school. When it comes to school grounds, Mr. List is just as attentive. He works tirelessly to power wash and clean all areas outside the building. Trees and bushes are always kept trimmed and tidy. When the 5th grade students revitalized a garden in honor of a former staff member, Mr. List willingly took on the task of making sure the garden was pruned and watered over the summer. Mr. List always wears a smile and works with a true can-do attitude, no matter what is asked of him. He is friendly and welcoming to teachers, staff, students, and all who visit the building. His work ethic is of the highest quality, and as a graduate of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the condition of Annapolis Elementary shows Justin's allegiance to his home county. Justin List, you are 100% professional at all times, and your professionalism shows in all that you do in the building. You take great pride in your work, and you are a tremendous asset to Annapolis Elementary School. So for these reasons and more, the Board of Education is honored to recognize you Employee of the Month for February 2017. Congratulations. Please join me up front. I'm glad. Well, how did they get you here?
I thought I was picking up a table.
Oh, probably to refinish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, who's here with you?
I have my mom, Miss Jefferson, the principal secretary, my grandmother, Alice Schaefer, and her husband, Gene Ryden. It's my family.
Oh, well, thank you for coming, and there will be pictures afterwards. Mrs. Kesslicker, I know, is so sorry not to be here. She's on medical leave, but she's able to watch this on video, so she'll be seeing it. And I want to present you this and this. And, you know, Annapolis Elementary is close to my heart. My 3 grandchildren attend Annapolis Elementary, so I'm there often. And Mrs. Jefferson is so wonderful and helpful all the time. And that school is always spotless, out front, and when I walk in, before the renovation and then afterwards. So I want to thank you, because I know renovating and moving in and out, what hard work it is for you. And thank you so much. I really appreciate everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next item is 2.08, Volunteer of the Month, Mrs. Burge.
Thank you. While most of our 18,000 Anne Arundel County Public School volunteers dedicate their time and talents to support their own children's schools, volunteers from the larger community are motivated by a wide variety of reasons, some very personal and touching. Today, the Board of Education is pleased to recognize one such community member, Mr. William Buck of Jacobsville Elementary School. He is our February Volunteer of the Month. Since 2008, Mr. Buck has volunteered to honor his late wife, Stacy Buck, who was a well-loved Jacobsville Elementary classroom teacher. An avid gardener, Mr. Buck has volunteered his skills and experience to single-handedly transform the school's neglected, overgrown courtyard gardens into beautiful, inviting outdoor spaces. He carefully designs and installs plantings, then weeds, waters, and mulches the school's garden beds year-round. Students and staff alike love to tap Mr. Buck's deep knowledge of the perennials, annuals, herbs, and vegetables he cultivates. Above all, Mr. Buck volunteers at Jacobsville Elementary to expand students' horizons. Media specialist Jennifer Richards says that Mr. Buck told her he wants students to enjoy and appreciate gardening the way he does, to see and touch flowers of different colors and textures. Mr. Buck purposely planted butterfly-attracting flowers and shrubs to bring first graders butterfly science lessons to life. His regular status reports on the garden's praying mantis population motivate students to research and gain appreciation for this fascinating insect. Once forgotten, the courtyards are now natural extensions of the school building. Weather permitting, they are outdoor classrooms, special event venues, and even the studio for students' school photographs. Students especially love to read in the courtyard just outside the library, known as the Reading Circle. It is dedicated to the memory of Mrs. Buck and another former teacher, Mrs. Sherba. As a Lakeshore Rotary Club member, Mr. Buck coordinates the highly anticipated annual third grade rite of passage, a dictionary gift for each third grader. Reading specialist Tara Kohler writes, Mr. Buck personally presents a dictionary to each student and ensures each knows how to use it, and he always has a good story to go with it. When not gardening or distributing dictionaries, Mr. Buck can be found shelving library books or chatting with students who love to tell him of their special events and accomplishments. Principal Gwen Atkinson writes, I wonder if Mr. Buck realizes how much he has done for our school community. The children learn so much from him, and all who enter Jacobsville Elementary are greeted by Mr. Buck's lovely, welcoming gardens. He is truly our unsung hero. Mr. Buck, would you please come forward? With great appreciation, I present this Volunteer of the Month certificate and bell to you. Thank you so much for all that you do for our kids.
Well, thank you.
Sounds like-
This is certainly unexpected.
Well, so how did they get you here?
They told me there was some kind of a meeting with the, I guess, the school maintenance staff or whatever. They thought that our outdoor area was very well maintained and everything. And I thought, well, it probably could even be a little bit more well maintained by me at some time. But anyhow, it's great to be here and accept this award.
here's
And
a
thank
bell
you very
for you.
much. Well, thank you very much.
And who came here to be with you?
Well, I wasn't expecting, except that I did see my son earlier, who is Timothy Buck, and my grandson that's going to be celebrating his first birthday in about another week and a half, and my daughter, Katie Buck, and my, I'm going to call her, it's Miss Diane, or Granzy for, as my grandson would probably be calling her. But in any case, I'm glad that they're all here, and I just really appreciate this so much.
Well, we want you to know how much we appreciate everything you do.
Right. Well, found out one thing recently that they were complaining about at the Jacobsville about that there was some kind of an odor that was sort of filtering into some of the rooms. And I went out there looking, and I thought that I couldn't really find anything, but what it is from boxwood bushes.
Oh.
And I went down to a lady that had come to the Rotary Club one time to talk from Himmel's Garden Center, and she told me that English boxwood
Well, you're very appreciated.
Our next item is 2.09, School and Community Highlights. Ms. Sasso?
Just to let the community know, the board, there were 4 of us that attended the Equity Symposium on Saturday and at the Marriott Hotel in Washington, D.C., which was really an outstanding presentation by the National NSBA, which basically brought to light, the disparity between the minorities and basically how could the problem be solved.
Mrs. Hummer?
I had the opportunity over the past couple of weeks to attend a couple of events through our Performing Visual Arts magnet schools. I went to an art show at Brooklyn Park Middle School, and where they had the visual arts students had different artwork displayed, and just amazing what these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are doing. And then I attended through Annapolis and Broadneck High School. A group of students created a performance in the vein of Hamilton. It was called Revolution, and they did all the research on history of Annapolis, and these students wrote their own soliloquies. They wrote the music and created songs, and it was phenomenal. And I'm hoping that we can get them to perform it again, perhaps in Annapolis or something, because I learned a lot, and it was really just amazing to see what the students could do. So many thanks to they had a visiting artist who worked with them, as well as the music teacher from Broadneck PVA, and it really was an incredible demonstration of the great things that are going on through our PVA magnet programs. Earlier this week, was it this week? I guess it was last week. It's all blurring together. Ms. Nally and I had the pleasure of attending the National Board's Certified Teachers Pinning Ceremony, and we had 24 teachers that received their National Board certification or their renewal for it. And these are as I said then, all of our teachers are rock stars, but our National Board Certified teachers are kind of the headliners of the rock stars. And it was just very inspiring to see how many of our teachers take that extra step to to perfect their craft and be the best teachers that they can be. I didn't attend the Equity Symposium, but I attended the other days with the National School Board Association this weekend for the Advocacy Institute of how we can approach our elected officials to advocate for education. And yesterday I had the pleasure of going with several other board members from around the state, and we met with all of our congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill and talked with them about increased funding for our career and tech education, Title I funding, special education, school nutrition, all areas that the federal government does have a role in, and all of our representatives and senators were very receptive and very supportive of the things that are going on. So it was a great day to be speaking out to the halls of power about the power of education. So
I just want to piggyback on that. I had the chance to go to the Equity Symposium and the Advocacy Institute, and our very own Carolyn Williams was invited to the podium to speak to a room of hundreds of people, and she was very impressive, and we're very proud of her that day. The next two items on the agenda, the CAC report and the PTA report. I understand we have no reports today, so we're going to move on to taking photos of our Educator, Employee, and Volunteer of the Month during a short break, and then we'll be back for public comment. will move on to the public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to our board assistant. I have 5 cards. I'll call up Matthew Gribble, Bruce Bell, Lisa Van Buskirk, Dr. Ryan Smith, and Emily Brandenburg.
Hi, I'm Matthew Gribble from Central Middle School. I'm currently an 8th grader there, and I'm here to speak against the Route 2 redistricting. My neighbors and I have been worried about leaving our home schools. I do not understand why I might have to leave and go to Annapolis when I've heard that the school is very crowded, and I think that adding more kids would hurt the school. I really like being part of the Edgewater community and all of the friends I have in it. I don't want to be separated from them. My older brother currently attends South River, and I've been set to go there since 1st grade, and I can't imagine going to another school. The kids on my baseball team are from the Route 2 area, all the way down past Mayo. We have been teammates for years, and it would be tough not to see my teammates and talk about the games and practices. I do well in all my classes, but I've been struggling in math with low grades like D's and C's. But with the volunteer tutors from South River, my grades have improved a lot. I've gotten to know them really well over the past few years, and to lose these tutors is sure to affect my grades. I know my mom has been going to a lot of the meetings to listen to the parents from all of the schools. It sounds like they have come up with a solution that will not involve leaving my Edgewater schools, and would make me very happy if you accepted the plan. Because of where I live, I don't want to be moved back and forth to different schools. I'm sure there's a lot to this I don't understand, but to me it's pretty simple. Keep us where we're at. So please, Miss Dr. Arlotto and the other board members, please let me and all of my Edgewater friends stay together in our home schools. So that's what I had to say about the redistricting on the Route 2 community. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Arlotto and members of the board. My name is Bruce Bell, and I live in Edgewater. I've spoken at several board meetings since last fall, and I'm fortunate to have gotten to know many of you better since then. Thank you for engaging our community. We are grateful for the cordial and productive dialogue. We have a better appreciation for the hard work and challenging issues you tackle as a Board of Education, not the least of which is redistricting. As you can see at our website, www.edgewaterkids.com, our community recognizes and respects the Board of Education's responsibilities. We also demonstrate that the objective data, the board's redistricting policy, and the current and future development in Annapolis all strongly favor a redistricting solution within the traditional Annapolis High School cluster. Capacity exists within the South River High School cluster for Edgewater's children and will be increased in the near future with the opening of Crofton High School. Including part of the Edgewater community in the Annapolis Peninsula redistricting is not logical and does more harm than good for addressing county-wide educational facility utilization. Edgewater kids would only add to the overcrowding in Annapolis. If you haven't already, you'll soon see the recommendations of the parent-led redistricting committee for the Annapolis Peninsula. Great news. They came up with very feasible solutions. After significant and thoughtful analysis, time, and effort, the parent members of the redistricting committee voted unanimously in favor of several solutions. The options they developed with the help of our county public schools planning professionals are sound and data-driven, and finally help alleviate capacity in the Annapolis school system, especially within the elementary schools. These options also specifically exclude Edgewater, mitigating unnecessary disruption to our community. This is an exceptional opportunity for the Board of Education to address their fiscal goals, to elevate all students, and to help create part of the long-term solution to redistricting for the entire county. So with that in mind, we're confident you will reach the same or similar conclusions reached by the redistricting committee and vote in favor of one of their solutions. We in the Edgewater community endorse this rational and sustainable approach to redistricting. I speak for my entire community when I sincerely say thank you. We appreciate your dedication to one of the best educational systems in the state of Maryland. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Board of Education, Dr. Alato, Lisa with Van Buskirk with Start School Later. This morning I'm here to encourage you to apply for MSDEs or Orange Ribbon for Healthy School Hours. With 3 recognition levels, Anne Arundel can potentially qualify for the lowest level for its 2014 task force. The 13-minute shift for next year may be insufficient to earn the next level up in recognition without a stated plan to move closer to 8:30 as recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, and U.S. Centers for Disease Control. You could do that in fiscal year 2018 budget. From my reading of the standards and research on school hours across the state, Garrett County is the closest to already meeting the standards for the highest level of recognition. Their high school starts at 8:25, their middle school at 8:35, and their elementary is between 8:15 and 8:45. Granted, they only have 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and a half a dozen elementary schools, but it can be done in the state. I encourage you, Anne Arundel County, in some friendly one-upmanship and statewide leadership among school systems by being the first to adjust your school hours based on science to earn the highest level of recognition from MSDE. Thank you.
Good morning, Board of Education and Dr. Alato. My name is Emily Brandenburg, and I'm the Education Officer for Anne Arundel County Government. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. In recent public comments, there have been some concerning suggestions and statements from the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County. I wanted to take a moment to share some data from both MSDE and some school system budget facts. So often, if it is repeated enough, anecdotal evidence is perceived as factual, whether there's truth behind the testimonials or not. Maryland State Department of Education produces an annual report concerning the numbers of teachers who transfer from local school system to local school system. Yep, can you not hear me? Is that better? Yes. Is that better? Sorry. From local school system to local school system. This data is compiled and analyzed by the state, not Anne Arundel County Public Schools, not the Teacher Association, and not Anne Arundel County government. I mention this because this is simply the data, no slant or paradigm in analysis. I wanted to share with you the last 3 years, which I think are important as we continue to hear that our teachers are leaving in droves for surrounding jurisdictions. In 2013 and 2014, Anne Arundel County Public Schools lost 67 teachers and hired 49 to other local Maryland school systems. In 2014-2015, Anne Arundel County Public Schools lost 66 teachers and hired 80. In 2015-2016, Anne Arundel County Public Schools lost 66 teachers and hired 84. What is noteworthy is that we are losing a number of teachers to surrounding jurisdictions. That number is not increasing or decreasing, however. What is increasing is the number of teachers we are hiring from surrounding jurisdictions. Clearly, Anne Arundel County Public Schools is attractive to teachers from other local school systems. Secondly, it was suggested by Richard Benford that our administration continuously funds at the minimum required level maintenance of effort. He could not be more wrong. Previously to Steve Shue coming into office, 2010 was the last time Anne Arundel County Public Schools had a budget in excess of maintenance of effort. That budget included only $923,000 above maintenance of effort. From 2011 to 2015, our school system did indeed have budgets that were at or below maintenance of effort. However, our current county executive was not in office for these budgets, as Richard Binford suggests. Anne Arundel County government has exceeded maintenance of effort requirements in both budgets since Steve Shue took office. In 2015, it was in excess of nearly $6 million, and in 2017, in excess of $7 million. Let's also not forget the additional $10 million we provided outside of MOE to help stabilize the health care fund. We anticipate a budget this year, again, that increases the Board of Education budget above the minimum required funding level. While we are all entitled to our own opinions, we are not entitled to our own facts. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Dr. Arlotto and Board. I'm here today with my wife. I'm Dr. Ryan C. Smith. I'm here today with my wife, Jennifer Smith. We're here because of concerns that we have for school safety regarding policies and procedures. Now, some of these, what I'll say, is borderline school bus safety, but I think it's bigger than that. It's mainly like school safety. If you'd allow me to speak, I would love to at this time. Our intent is just to inform the board of what occurred and to ask the board to consider our scenario when reviewing any safety policies involving our students. On September 12, 2016, our 6-year-old daughter heard a message over a school loudspeaker indicating that her bus would be a substitute bus. Our daughter and a classmate boarded the wrong bus, realized the mistake, and alerted the bus driver of this mistake. The bus driver instructed our daughter to sit down. Sometime after, the bus proceeded to leave the school with her daughter and classmates still on the bus. The classmate gets off on a non-normal bus stop that was close to his home. He made it home safely. After all bus stops were made, the bus driver realized her daughter was still on the bus and told him that he had to pick up other kids at Enton Elementary. Our daughter goes to Wall Chapel. This is a completely different off the bus route. At 3:40, while her daughter was eventually taken to Enton Elementary and escorted into the school by another adult. At 3:40 p.m., our oldest daughter got off the bus and asked where her younger sister was. This is the first time that my wife and I were notified of the incident. We called the school. The school called the bus company. Finally, we realized the situation of our daughter being dropped off. So my wife went to go pick up our youngest daughter, and as she goes into school, she wasn't even checked for ID, was allowed to, the school just released her daughter to her. My wife and I have had meetings with the Wall Chapel Elementary School principal, a representative from the County School Transportation Department, and a representative from the school bus company to discuss multiple issues that occurred. We're not looking for justice. We just want to make sure that, the future of our children and everybody else's children that go to schools in this county, that it's safe. Let's learn from our mistakes, proceed further. My wife and I feel that this entire situation could have been avoided had the bus driver called the school while still parked at the school. When we asked during these various meetings why wasn't a cell phone or similar technology used, the response that we received was that current policy prevented it. Essentially, the bus had to be parked, turned off before that cell phone could be used. We think, I check Maryland laws, I check federal laws. I didn't see anything that stated that a cell phone could not be used while the vehicle is in park, and that's not just for a school bus, but for any vehicle. A request for the board to standardize policies for Anne Arundel County schools for situations like this one that could easily have been prevented had common sense been used. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the board at this time?
Go ahead. Oh, no. Where you going?
Are you all done?
Yes.
My name is Stephen Whiting, and I'm a parent at I'm a student at Severn Elementary. On January 30th, after a weekend of protests at airports around the nation, I received a letter from the board in my inbox. I was glad to see, regarding the immigration policy, I was glad to see the board decided to make a statement about the federal immigration policy. I wonder why it took so long. We've had several incidents in this county already regarding Muslim students being targeted, African American students being targeted for this KKK, what was it, that KKK sign-up sheet that they had, Cool Kids Klan or whatever. I'm hoping that the school system sees in the letter and mention that when my son goes to school, he's just a student, which is true. I thought that it was great that you all wanted to bring an idea of unity around our differences. I thought that was great. But I hope that you see that my son is going to be more than a student when he just comes there, when he comes to school. He brings a great deal of passion. He also brings his own history to the school, his own identity. And when he gets into school, he's also, you know, you may look at him as a student who needs who's the IDEA, who's part of IDEA. We don't know if we'll have IDEA after, you know, Betsy DeVos gets, we don't know if we'll have any public schools after Betsy DeVos gets confirmed. We don't know what's going to happen. So I hope that we as a community can stand up and have courage and have a new type of educational leadership that does not ignore the identities of public school students but encourages unity, that we are, to quote one candidate from last year, stronger together. And it will take professional development to be stronger together. It will take cultural competency classes for principals, for teachers, and for administrators to be stronger together. And I understand there's a equity initiative. Hopefully we can take advantage of these opportunities to explain all these various identities and how they make us stronger together. And it's not just, you know, the opportunity when problems arise that we take advantage of this, but that it's a constant initiative, especially now that, you know, we have this guy in office. It's going to take the allocation of resources to hire teachers that are not colorblind, but color aware. It will take principals who have to confront ICE agents and do not encourage the disruption of students' homes. There was an executive order signed last week where we'll have 10,000 new ICE agents hired, and they also reduced the restrictions on criminality. So everyone is basically going to be seen as a criminal. If you read Section 5 of the executive order that the president signed last week, he basically declared that there's going to be, if you're seen as a criminal, or if you were charged with a criminal charge, you have the possibility of being detained and deported. So this is something that's going to be ramping up. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So we need to have leadership from you all, and I think that this letter was a great first step, and I hope that we can continue to build upon it and think about some things of what we can do in the future. Thank you.
Dr. Arlotto and the board, I was scheduled for it later on, but I thought after the doctor spoke about bus safety that I might as well just follow up with that. Is that all right?
Are you wanting to speak about the school bus safety presentation that's coming?
No, because I don't know anything about that, but I came, it's really about the whole busing system, and so I'm inclined to think that it covers more than just.
If it's not about safety, we can take it now. Otherwise, we need you to come in a couple of items down.
There might be something that would have applied to the safety and welfare of the kids, but I'm not sure it's just about safety. There's been an issue, obviously ongoing and increasing about the cost.
I'm sorry, could you state your name for the record?
John Creasy.
Okay.
About the cost of busing and the difficulty of start times with the schools. And I've not seen anybody dispute the findings of the sleep deprivation for our kids or anything. So if we move past that, I would also say that if you took people mentioned millions of dollars that would go into improving the start times for the schools, but if you divided that by the number of taxpayers in Anne Arundel County, it's a practically insignificant amount. I think with the math that I did, it's under $50 a year. But having said that, there's also another alternative that I think deserves study, and that is improving the sidewalk system near our schools so that within a mile or 3/4 of a mile or half a mile, depending upon maybe the age of the student or the location or whatever, someone should be looking at and doing a study of what we could save by putting in sidewalks so our students could walk instead of being bused a half mile away, which I've seen personally in our neighborhood. It doesn't make sense to me if this hasn't been done. I understand that there's probably silos involved here between Public Works and the Education Department, but with all the additional funding that's coming in from the casinos and everything, I should imagine that this would be a small item to bear. You could even throw in, along with the study, to see how many students are within a half mile. You could also even throw in a health report as to what it would do for our students if they got a little exercise walking back and forth. I've personally seen, I happen to have a 9-year-old daughter, and I've personally seen that there's issues with staffing on the buses and with providing alternatives for drivers who are out sick and everything. And the whole issue, rather than going along with what's there, I think we have to go outside the box and go back to how we could just whittle our way back down to a reasonable bus system that can be met by the staffing and the money that's available. Is that health or welfare or?
Definitely.
Sure. If I could just respond quickly, and I do want to speak, gentlemen, here. With regard to sidewalks, it's something that we take a look at every year, part of our facilities department. We partner with the county, and you talked about silos. We've broken down those silos, so this board every year puts money in their budget, about $250,000 a year, to put towards sidewalks that are not on our property. So things that are on our property, we are handling as a school system, but there's $250,000 built into this board's budget each year that we then transfer back to the county government. We work with them in identifying those areas where we can extend walks leading up to our schools. And we work with the police department. They make recommendations. Parks and Rec make recommendations. So we do that. We try and break down some of those silos. So I just want to give you that information.
Just to go back on that a little bit, I just wonder if more money couldn't be made available if, in fact, they found that if we spent $2 million in a year and put sidewalks for 50 schools out there, and it alleviated 1,000 buses and allowed 15,000 more kids to walk to school, whether that wouldn't pay for itself immediately.
True, you then have to convince parents that those parents that we're now extending that radius, and that's part of board policy, the radius of the distance that elementary students, middle school students, and high school students walk. We'd have to convince them to allow their children to walk as opposed to taking a bus. But those are part of the considerations that we take in.
I did further than that, uphill each way.
Was it snowing? Thank you. And thank you for your comments. Your comments are very well received. We appreciate that. It's not the first time that we, the board, or I, the superintendent, have put a letter out like that. We put one out similarly. I did in November, but I appreciate your comments. If you've got a minute or into the future, if you've got some ideas, Mr. Olson, Anthony Olson, we have an Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement that are working on these issues. You're absolutely right. It shouldn't be a one-off issue that gets us to do something. They should be ongoing issues about appreciating diversity for our school system and educating our children. While we do take individual events as opportunities for learning, right? There are ongoing initiatives throughout the system. This team is dedicated to elevating all students and eliminating all gaps every day. It's everything in every one of their departments that we're focused on. So I very much appreciate you bringing it up. And if you've got a minute to chat with Anthony and we can share some information, you can learn more, and we can also learn more from you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Alato and board. My name is Janet Norman. I'm an Annapolis High and Annapolis Middle parent. And I'm hoping to talk to you about transparency and the proposed FY18 budget you're evaluating and finalizing right now. I just wanted to see if we can make some changes for next year, because I'm fortunate enough to work 5 minutes away and be able to take vacation time to come here and talk to you. But I know that thousands of people cannot do that. Your 6,000 teachers cannot come to the daytime meetings and talk to you about what's important to them and what they see is needed in the upcoming budget. I referred you earlier to the October 23rd, 2015, October 23rd, 2015 meeting, that your board meeting in the evening, where you had 4 hours of teachers coming out and telling you what they thought was the best moves, and some of them were phenomenal, really speaking about what was needed in the system from their perspectives. So I want to point out that from this past October to this coming March, 7 board meetings were during the daytime, during the workday, when people can't come and testify. 3 meetings were in the evening. 1 was the workshop on the budget, where no public testimony is taken. 1 was a regular meeting, and 2 were public testimony where you could only speak once on the budget. So essentially 2 meetings were in the evening and 7 meetings were during the daytime, during that important development time for the budget. So, for transparency, you're asking for $1.6 billion from the public, and they need to be able to endorse what you're doing and feel like they have some guidance and say in the matter before them. You're going to be asking for a lot of money, 51% of the county budget. So you need to provide the opportunity to listen to the people who are paying for that. I know an Annapolis police officer couldn't be here today. She would tell you that she has joint custody of their high school student, so she has to drive in that student when the student's staying with them, and she has to yank her 4- and 9-year-old out of bed to get in the car with them at 6:30 in the morning to go along, because she can't leave her kids home alone when she drives in that high school student for that ungodly early hour. So I'm asking you to please put money in the budget to fix school bus times. Don't leave it out of the 2018 budget. There's a Glen Burnie teacher that used to look in horror as her students, she saw students running across Route 2 in the dark at 6:50 in the morning, dodging like Frogger, about to get hit. So that school time still needs to be adjusted. It's not safe. It horrified her to see how dangerous it was for her students to be doing that. How are you using the money that was saved in fuel savings, from the hundreds of thousands to $1 million estimate of fuel savings? We need transparency in, are you using that to fix the transportation system? Why are you not choosing to contact the University of Maryland Transportation Logistics that Howard County is doing to work on adjusting the efficiency of their bus routing and work toward later start times and healthy start times for the elementary schools, healthy start times for everybody? They're not taking an entire year to ground truth the system. They're doing it on 3 days, and University of Maryland experts in the field nationally are helping them do this. You have bus savings money. You have fuel savings money. You could do that immediately. You could get their expertise to help you. They're doing it on 3 days that are like teacher work days, and running the buses on those days to see how the route change is doing it. So I urge you to take every opportunity to get public input and support for all the good things you are doing for our students. But you could be doing better to have them go at safe and healthy hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to remind the public that our meetings are videotaped and posted on the internet, and that if you go to the Board of Education tab on the drop-down, you can click on board members. You have all of our emails and phone numbers, and we absolutely read them and take them into account. So if you're not able to come here to a meeting, you can watch it and certainly reach out to us if you have some concerns or questions. The next section on the agenda are consent items, award of contracts. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to bundle 4.01 through 4.04 and move them from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the Board of Education award contract number 17-198 medical and prescription drug contract to Care First in the amount of $20,907,000.
Is there any board questions or comments? I know we don't have a presentation. Mrs. Hummer?
So we are looking at a savings for the school system and our employees of $16.8 million over the next 3 years. That's fabulous. Thank you very much to everyone who negotiated this and worked to find these savings for us. I think we all know that our healthcare fund and health costs are rising exponentially, and any savings we can find, and this is huge. So thank you very much.
I know the Capitol wrote today that the healthcare deficits were Dr. Arlotto's responsibility to fix, and I think that Dr. Arlotto and you guys, the whole team, have done a stellar job in taking a step toward fixing what is in our control to fix. And I just want to thank you guys for everything you've done. Are there any other questions? I have one comment on item 4.01. Emily Brandenburg. Sorry to make you come back. We need a portable mic.
I'm going to stand this time. Is this easier? Can you hear me? Again, my name is Emily Brandenburg, and I'm the Education Officer for Anne Arundel County Government. Our administration wants to publicly acknowledge all the hard work and effort by Anne Arundel County Public Schools Administration and the Board of Education concerning our healthcare crisis. There are many moving parts to this complicated situation, and the new contract with Care First is a piece of a long-term solution. Thank you. The structural deficit can only be solved with a team approach. Our administration is committed to continuing to be a team player, as is the administration of Anne Arundel County Public Schools and the Board of Education. However, to the extent that the bargaining units continue to refuse to contribute and to be part of the solution, we cannot be expected to continue to write blank checks. The expectation is that all parties come to the table and work collaboratively towards an acceptable solution. So again, much like your comment, I really wanted to publicly thank the administration and the Board of Education for being a team player and working through this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on items 4.01 through 4.04? All right, all those in favor? Motion passes 900.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to the team.
Our next item is a review item, 5.01, a presentation on school bus safety. We bundled them. Yeah, we did. Yes, we bundled.
Does Dr. Arlotto not have
Yes, he.
No, he only read the first one. I think that's what he said.
Oh, okay. So can you recommend all four of them, and then we'll revote?
I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought that I had just heard that we were looking at the first one. So with the bundled consent items, I'm recommending that the board approve all contracts 4.01 through 4.04 inclusive on your agenda.
Right, just to double check, there's no board questions or comments on the rest of them?
No.
And no public comment? All right. Is
the public aware that 4.02, for example, is a $125,000 contract?
It's public. It's public. Yeah, it's published.
How would they learn that?
It's published on the website. Yeah, this is the.
It's sent out the week prior.
These are sent out the week.
Mm-hmm.
They're published on the website.
Right.
Yeah, this is all been publicly available for a week.
I guess I would just say, for the benefit of people here in the room, I understand it's available since less else, but if we're passing approval of contracts that are $125,000, $1.9 million, and $2 $25 million, that the people in the room should at least get to hear that.
That's fine. That's just not how we've handled it historically.
No, I don't want to vote against them. I want them to be addressed.
If you want to vote against them being consent items, you can do that.
No, I don't want to do that. I just want them to be addressed to the people that are in the room. Can we do that, please?
Yeah. That means you want to vote against them being consent
No, it doesn't,
items.
Ms. Burge. It means I want them to be addressed to the people that are in the room. Don't tell me what I mean. I know what I mean.
Consent items means you're bundling them.
Well, then
So you don't want them to be bundled.
I want to read these line items to the people that are in the room so they could hear these numbers, and then we can vote on them. That's what I want.
So you don't want them to be bundled.
Mrs.
That's
Hummer.
what I'm saying.
So,
That's not what bundle means.
we had, the motion had been made to bundle these 4 contracts together. If we do not want these, if you do not want them to be bundled and you want them to be voted on separately, then vote against the bundling of the 4 issues and they'll be addressed separately.
Okay.
But the vote was made to bundle the items. Has it been voted on? We already voted.
Yes, we did.
To bundle the items and consider them as a group.
I know what I voted on, and I know what Dr. Arlotto read. He read contract 17-198 and specified a contract for $20.9 million. And what I'm saying is, if we're going to bundle them, let's speak to them so that the people in this room and who are watching can understand what we're doing. Just read the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th items.
And Mr. Grannon, I do apologize. For some reason, I was hearing differently. I did not hear the bundle of consent items. If that's the reason I read that number and that contract number specifically, because I was completely my fault. Completely my fault. In terms of our typical protocol, once those consent items and the board has voted to bundle them, then I don't read them specifically. I just ask that they all be approved in one single vote. I'm glad to do it any way this board wants to. Again, I do apologize. I was hearing something different, or apparently had fallen asleep briefly there in a senior moment, so I apologize. I just didn't, that's the reason I read that one specifically and not the others. I'm glad to do that if the board chooses to do that, but in our typical protocols, once the board has bundled them, I don't or have not read them independently.
Okay.
I'm glad to follow the direction of the board.
Ms. Sasso.
Is there any way, there's no need of going through argument here. I mean, the 5 minutes we're spending, can't we just read them and put the amount and then just keep on going? And next time everybody understands that when you bundle, you consent to not read individual. So can we just go ahead?
I'd be glad to.
Correct. So let's try this again. Your recommendation, please.
So would you like me just to show, since they've already been voted on, I'll just read the numbers as they apply to each of the contracts. Okay, so as we said, the first contract having to do with our medical prescription drug contract with Care First is for $20,907,000. The second contract of the 4 of the consent items is for a cooperative with National Gas Supply Service, and this is for the Baltimore Regional Cooperative Purchasing Committee Agreement. And this will go to Constellation New Energy Gas Division for a total of $125,000. The third of the 4.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. The third of the 4 is for relocatable classroom transportation, and this goes to EMH Environmental Incorporated, and that's for a total of $1,903,350,000. And the fourth of the 4 is a contract for student transportation services, and this goes to several companies: Chesapeake Charter, R.E. Wilson and Sons, Jubbs Bus Service, Smith Bus Service, Lonergan's Charter Service, and MBG Enterprises, and lastly, Annapolis Bus Company. That all combined is a total of $25,895,805.48.
Thank you.
Those are the 4.
Thank you. Item 5.01, the school bus safety presentation.
So thank you. For the record, I'm Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer. I was to have been joined by Mr. Les Douglas, our Supervisor of Transportation. Unfortunately, he is out of state dealing with a family-related matter. So we'll plow forward. This is in reference to item 5.01. It is a review item regarding the state of school bus safety. So in light of recent incidents, it's timely to have an opportunity to go through our processes here at Anne Arundel County Schools, and not just talk about the school buses themselves, but our processes and procedures as they relate to safety and relate to school bus drivers. So before discussing that, we really need to talk a little bit about context. So on average, between 2001 and 2008, approximately 18 school-age children have died in transportation-related crashes.
Can I hear that period again? I apologize.
2001 to 2010, on average about 18 per year. And that's a statistic that's held pretty constant going back about 30 years, actually. So it's important to take then into context relative to school bus transportation compared to other modes of transportation as well. So taking a look at the fatalities using federally available data, about 58% of those fatalities actually occur while the student is being driven by another teenage driver. It's about 58%. Another 23% of those fatalities occur while the student is being driven by an adult, excluding school buses, so being driven in a private vehicle or some other adult mechanism. And of particular note, it is actually less than one, we round it up, but less than 1% of all fatalities occur while on a public school bus. And this, again, this is using national statistics. So with school bus safety in mind, school buses are primarily intended to protect the passengers on the bus while they are both in motion as well as while they are stopped, either in the process of picking up and or discharging students. And we'll go through the different safety features, beginning with the safety features that are obvious on the outside, the external features of a bus. First and foremost is the lighting. So there's very distinguishable and standardized yellow and red flashing lighting that's sort of universally recognized, as well as a mechanized stop arm. Both of those are intended to outwardly signal to surrounding motorists that what the bus's intentions are, that the bus is now coming to a stop, and the bus is executing either an onboarding or discharging process of the students. Continuing on, buses have large multi-segmented mirrors that allow the bus driver to have an enhanced view around the buses. The multi-segmented are in different angles and they are in different aspect ratios, some closer, some further. Again, they work in concert to enhance the visibility and viewability of the driver regarding the external conditions, and in particular the danger zones for students as they are uptight against the bus. It's maybe not as obvious, but it is actually. The color, there's a universal color. There actually is a school bus yellow. It's an official color that's recognized by the National Highway Transportation Safety Board that buses have to be. Manufacturers actually have to certify that their school bus yellow complies with those federal guidelines. And the sort of ubiquitous nature of that color, again, is an outwardly signal to folks that it is a school bus. It has an intended purpose, and again, it's sort of that pre-teaching to our external environment. And finally, we have a crossing arm, a mechanized crossing arm that the most dangerous part from the driver's perspective is really that part in front of the bus, because part of it is unfortunately obscured by the engine, by the hood. Bus manufacturers and safety engineers take a tremendous amount of care to design the front of buses to minimize that, but to aid in that, one of the things that they do on buses that actually do have a forwardly projecting hood is to put that mechanized arm that allows the area in front of the bus to be cleared and allows that bus driver to continue to have good visual observation of youngsters in front of the bus. So digging a little bit deeper, buses are really designed to do a number of functions. One of them is to minimize the force of the impact on a passenger. Secondly, they're designed to essentially create a less dangerous or less hazardous environment to the passengers should a collision occur. And finally, they're designed to facilitate an orderly and easy evacuation of the bus. And we'll go into these in a little bit more detail. So essentially, the theory is that you're trying to minimize or mitigate the forces of an impact, and you really do that in two principal mechanisms. You absorb the energy of the impact, and you buy time for the occupants of the vehicle. Those two forces together essentially collaborate to enhancing the safety features for the passengers. Speaking specifically about absorbing the impact, there's a number of features of the bus that clearly relate to that. One is simply the size and the mass of the bus. In most instances, it is the big horse in town. The law of physics say it's going to win. So simply the size and the mass of the bus, again through laws of physics, will absorb most of the energy, and in fact most of the energy will be transferred to these typically smaller vehicle that either we're coming in contact with or who is coming in contact with us. There will be a brief video in a second that will show another element to absorb. The cab of the bus is not rigidly adhered to the frame. This will be replayed in a second. It actually is designed to ride the frame in the case of a frontal impact. Riding the frame allows the frame, the undercarriage, to take that stiff direct impact while the front of the bus decelerates at a slower pace, and the crumple zone in front of the bus purposely is sacrificial in nature to continue to absorb that energy, and then the timing of that allows that impact to be spread over a greater time period, so the forces, instead of it occurring instantaneously, are spread over a piece of time. So they're decelerating in the process and therefore less harmful, less damaging to the occupants of the bus. Another key element is compartmentalization of the bus. So you'll see a lot of padded protection in the bus. For example, the padding provides energy absorbing materials to provide that protection to the occupants. Additionally, the bus seats themselves articulate. They're not a rigid frame construction. They are designed to actually tilt forward by about a 30% cant that allows the occupants to decelerate. And again, you're not having a rigid object. There's some flexibility that allows that energy to dissipate during the course of that deceleration process. I spoke about a less dangerous environment, so there are a number of factors that come into play, specifically engineered controls that we utilize to create that less dangerous environment. One of them is simply through the elimination of a lot of the hard or sharp surfaces. So when you go onto a bus, you're not going to see exposed sheet metal. You're not going to see exposed screws or rivets or things like that that could essentially create that opportunity. School buses have sort of evolved over time. This is sort of a composite picture, but looking back at older school buses, you would have seen very short, very rigid, non-padded school bus seats to what we have today, which are tall, padded, dynamic seats. So the seats are actually part of that safety mechanism, and you'll see in the picture the way they've evolved across time. Specifically, the next slide will show the extent of the raised backs, which are more supportive essentially. Think about your car of old and your car of new has raised adjustable seat headrests, for example, that elevate the height of that seat to provide additional support. So buses do that much the same. Again, that energy absorbing padding, and the padding itself has to meet flame retardant and flammability standards that are promulgated by the federal government. Speaking to the outside of the bus is also designed to, again, absorb and deflect a lot of the potential impact. We spoke about the front of the bus a little while ago and how it's connected to the undercarriage. Similarly, the side of the bus has structural rails that are built into them. We call them rub rails. But essentially, they are strategically positioned to protect the compartment, protect the interior of the bus, and again, continue to absorb energy. So that's part of the theme. Moving further into the design of the bus, all buses have safety glazing inside of them, and there's really two features of the safety glazing. One of them is that the glass actually has a film that's inserted between the layers of the glass that helps the glass stick together, not shatter into many pieces, so the film is sandwiched in between and adhered. The second piece, though, is the tempering, the design of the glass itself. It's manufactured in a way that when it does break, it breaks into patterns that are rounder, smaller, and softer, as opposed to long shards that have either pointy and or sharp edges. So you're not going to find that. That's not going to be the typical break pattern of safety glazing. Again, you've probably witnessed that on maybe some of the front windshields on traditional vehicles. Well, buses have that on not just the front, but on all of their glass glazing materials. The undercarriage of the bus, we know that the fuel tanks are obviously a source of vulnerability. So the fuel tanks on public school buses are protected by a heavy safety cage that protects it from mechanical damage. Again, absorbs some of the energy before anything would be to come in contact with the fuel tank itself. And then the source of the fuel inside of the bus, we use a specialized diesel that actually has a higher flash point, a higher flame point. So even the selection of the fuel itself speaks to safety, because the auto ignition levels and the amount of energy required to ignite diesel fuel is much higher than it would be for either conventional gasoline or other hybrid alternative blended fuels. This is probably what most folks think about the most, evacuation. So buses are designed to create that orderly and easy bus evacuation should the bus become disabled or be placed in a hazardous condition. We want to be able to evacuate the bus as quickly as possible. And it's important to note that essentially the evacuation plan for the bus is designed to strategically be able to support that evacuation no matter what configuration the bus winds up in. So should it be on its tires, on its side, or on its roof, in all three configurations, you have a combination of roof hatches, you've got your traditional front and rear or front and side discharge points, as well as some of the windows, much like you would maybe or accustomed to on a plane. So some of the windows are strategically designed to be dislodged as well to allow that evacuation. It's important to note that we do multiple full-scale bus evacuations each and every year at each and every one of our schools. They practice a combination of drills. So, for example, they'll run a scenario one, which will be front door only evacuation, assuming the back door is blocked. Scenario two will be using only the rear or the side door, assuming that the front door is blocked. The third scenario will be using all available mechanisms. And we do that with the buses. While the buses are loaded with students, we allow the driver to give instruction, and we physically run those scenarios. The board members that have students in our system or our former principals know the way that the bus drills go. They're observed, they're critiqued, and feedback is given not just to the bus driver, but feedback is given and instruction is given to the students and the school's administration as well. Buses, as you might well suspect, go through a very comprehensive and highly regulated inspection process. So all the safety features on a bus are routinely and regularly reviewed to ensure that they are obviously in place and functional. And this information is filed not just with us, but it's kept on file with the Department of Motor Vehicles to ensure that that bus stays certified. Prior to accepting a bus, even for its very first run in its service life, there's a detailed acceptance check that's done to ensure that all of the features that were specified and designed and are supposed to come on a bus, again, in fact did, that they're all operational, they're in good order, and that essentially the drivers and the service mechanics all understand how to utilize those various features. Buses go through at least there's a minimum of 4 mandated inspections a year, that being summer, spring, and fall, as well as a detailed a separate brake inspection that has to be done. Again, These are very prescriptive inspections that are done in a very regimented manner. And again, the results of all those are both kept locally as well as reported back to MVA. Each and every day, assuming that the bus departs on morning runs and afternoon runs, so twice a day in that scenario at a minimum, the driver has to do what they call pre-trip inspection. So it's a circle inspection around the perimeter of the bus, as well as an inspection of the interior of the bus to make sure that all those safety features are operational that day. So do the lights work? Do we have any lights out? Did the cross arm extend and return back? Did a stop arm extend and return back? So essentially, there's a detailed checklist. It's exactly analogous to what an airline pilot would do before they take off on one of their runs. And so while I've spent a lot of time talking about the bus itself, I've spent no time up to this moment talking about what's probably the most important element of the bus, and that is the bus driver. To have an experienced, well-trained, healthy, and alert bus driver is a critical element to the overall process. So a bus driver is expected to protect students, drive defensively during the course of their activities, and maintain vigilance. And the vigilance is not just for the students on the bus. It's not just vigilance over the students who are entering or discharging from the bus, but really that situational awareness all the way around. So other obstructions in the road, other vehicles, any hazards that may be out on the road, such as down wires or trees, anything you and I would do as a normal motorist. They're expected to do that continuously to, again, ensure that that the safety of the students is paramount. We as an organization have a lot of responsibility and a lot of interaction with the drivers. That occurs before they're hired, that occurs during their onboarding and training and certification phases, and then that also continues to occur throughout their life of their employment. So before a driver even is considered for employment, there's a number of steps that we as an employer, the transportation department, has to do. So part of that is we receive detailed driving records, including MVA reports, and even to the extent that we get reports on any items that are probation before judgment, anything that's on a STET docket, et cetera. So we receive a very detailed report. We check the MSDE and Motor Vehicle Department bus management systems to make sure that there are no prior infractions, no tickets, no actions that have been taken against a driver, either in the private or public sector, that we can, again, glean from those management systems. We enter the driver into those very same systems so that, again, the MVA and MSDE and Anne Arundel County Public Schools now can maintain a profile on that driver, and that is a triggering mechanism for a number of different reports that I'll speak about in a second. We authorize federal, state, and criminal background checks. We use both the CGIS system as well as the FBI fingerprinting system, as well as the commercial background service, again, looking at multiple sources of information to make sure that driver doesn't have a record that we need to be aware and or concerned about. And then finally, that driver has to go through a Department of Transportation mandated health and drug alcohol screening battery that's very prescriptive, and that's applicable to any driver who is trying to get what's called a CDL, or commercial driver's license, here in the United States of America. That's pre-employment. Now we'll sort of shift during the phase where a driver is being trained and being considered for employment here, post that initial screening. Obviously, there's extensive classroom training. Again, much of it is prescriptive, and part of it is operational. So both what are the required elements to be a school driver from the federal and state levels, as well as what are our expectations and our requirements to drive for us. Because remember, as a school district, Anne Arundel County Schools, we absolutely can, and we do, set a higher level of expectation than what the federal government and the state simply require. So there's that classroom training. There's behind-the-wheel training that, again, is facilitated by our staff, and that is over and above whatever that they may be receiving from their contracted employer, because again, remember, the vast majority of our buses are contracted. However, we, to ensure that there's fidelity in that training and to ensure that it's being delivered up to our expectations, that's conducted by us, again, principally, again, whatever they receive otherwise is supplemental. They have to then, the driver themselves has to go through the MVA to get their state and then ultimately their federal CDL license. And it's not just the conventional CDL license that is the generic version. They also have to apply for, test into, and get 2 additional endorsements. One is for a school bus, specific to school bus. A second one is a passenger endorsement. So if you drove for a Greyhound or you drove for Dillon Bus Service, you would have a P endorsement. You'd have a CDL, but you still wouldn't be eligible to drive an Anne Arundel County public school bus. You would have to go above what a Greyhound or Dillon's Bus Service employee would have to do and get yet a S endorsement for that. And then finally, there's an evaluation process that has to be signed off on by us as an employer before you are allowed to drive one of our buses. And then we continue on. There's a number of steps that are ongoing during the course of an employee's service here. So we do maintain a large cadre of individual records, DOT, MVA, physicals, accident reports, all of the pre-service, the in-service, the employment and discipline records are maintained here, and some portion of those also, again, have to be entered into both MSDE and MVA databases. We have a automated system that notifies drivers when they are required to take their federally mandated DOT physicals. When they are due, we're notified. We notify them affirmatively. We don't rely on them remembering when their DOT physical is due. So we continue to notify them, and then once that physical is completed and we receive the documentation, that is also put into the database. That database is checked each and every day to make sure that we don't have anyone that's out of compliance. Similarly with that, we have an automated process that on a daily basis does information pulls. It pulls that information from various databases to make sure that there are no CDL infractions or other infractions in not just Maryland's, but other motor vehicle departments, etc. And daily reports are generated. So it's not, again, when we think about asking for a report, it's a very affirmative, very deliberative daily activity. CDL drivers in the United States are required to undergo random drug testing. That is true here as well. We outsource that process on both parts. So the randomization, so running the lottery to identify drivers for random testing is a very prescriptive and regimented methodology of that under the federal government. We outsource that to a firm that is essentially accredited to comply with the federal government. We also then, when not simply the randomization of the lottery, but then we outsource the testing, the drug and alcohol testing as well, to an outfit that is certified under NIH to be able to conduct that testing. And so we get those results back. We notify the drivers. We get results back. Again, there's a very prescriptive process to that. We are required to do an annual in-service training. The state of Maryland requires a number of hours of training that we at a minimum have to provide. Anne Arundel County School doubles that, so we go many more hours above what the minimum requirements are that the state of Maryland puts in place. And again, we've got supervisors and other mid-level staff in transportation that does assessments and actually rides buses and or follows buses to ensure that they are being supervised and appropriately transporting our children as they go through the day. So again, ongoing supervision, and finally, we work collaboratively with our Department of Human Resources, with the security entity, Office Investigations within that. They again have access to databases that are not driving related, so these are databases that are interlinked with the criminal justice system, with the FBI systems, et cetera, so that if a driver was charged or picked up for a non-driving related infraction, we would become aware of that as well. And again, that's automated, and that's going on all the time, essentially. So, that said, safe transportation for every student every day is our goal, and we are firmly of the belief, and the statistics demonstrate one and the same, that transporting students on a bus to school and from school each and every day is by far the safest transportation mechanism, the safest choice for that student, the safest choice for that family. With that, I'm prepared to take any questions that the board might have.
Mrs. Sasso.
I have a question. Since you were talking about the bus construction, are those the standards of 2016, 2017?
Yeah, so there's two levels to that. So to begin with, the federal and state governments create a level of specifications that all school buses have to adhere to. We then, as a county, have specifications that are in excess of what the federal and state standards are. We're continuously monitoring that. So a bus has a service life of 12 years in the state of Maryland. So once it's put in service, it can continue in service, assuming that it meets all of its maintenance, inspections, et cetera. So it's got a 12-year maximum service life. The bus is up to the standards, and in fact, as I indicated earlier, exceeds the federal and state standards as of the date that it is put in service. So standards change over time. And let me not use a safety one, let me use an environmental one. So for example, the fuel efficiency standards may change. So a bus that is purchased and put in service in 2017 is complying with the EPA fuel and emission standards that are in effect as of 2017. If the federal government changes its fuel standards and in 2024, right, that's before 12 years, so at the midpoint, we're not going to go and change the engine in that bus. It's essentially grandfathered in is the word that we use.
Okay, the reason of my question is, since we just gave a $26 million contract to bus services, do all of the buses that we have contracted, do they all meet all our safety regulations within this span of time?
Yes, so again, any contract buses and AACPS buses are absolutely held to the exact same level of standards. There's no difference. Okay. They all have to comply with the federal requirements, they all have to comply with the state requirements, and they all have to apply with Anne Arundel County Public School requirements that are higher than either the federal or state standards.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Birch.
So first I want to clarify something. So they would need to qualify for the standards for the date in which they went into service.
Correct.
So if we had a contract with a school bus company and the bus they're using went into service 5 years ago, they don't have to qualify to the current standards, but the standards from 5 years ago.
Right. So, for example, you approved a contract earlier today. Right. The length of a school bus's life in the state of Maryland for the Western Shores is 12 years. The contract you approved today is for a 7-year duration. So yes. So there's a length of the contract, but then there's the length of the bus.
Right.
The specifications for the bus are always tied back to the day that they receive that certificate,
right,
that it's placed in service from the MVA, essentially.
So the contract really isn't tied to the age of the bus. They might be using some buses that are already in their 11th year of service, and then in a year or two, a new bus will be used for that route.
Correct.
So
and when that new bus comes in, that new bus will have to meet the
Okay.
new requirements.
Okay. My other question is something that I know everybody likes to talk about, and so I'm sorry, but I'm going to bring it up. Seat belts on buses. I know this is a big issue for a lot of people, and years ago I couldn't understand why we didn't do it, and then it finally was brought to my attention that one of the main reasons, besides the fact that buses are so safe, you yourself showed the data earlier that kids are actually safer in in a bus than in their parents' car.
By far.
By far, getting to school. But one of the reasons that I was told that seatbelts could be a problem, or that if, especially with small children, it would be very hard to evacuate children from a bus if they were all seatbelted in. I know that in special education buses there are restraints and seatbelts and things like that, but in just a regular, like if it was a busload of kindergartners who maybe couldn't all unbuckle themselves, that would be a very difficult thing to get them all out and get them off the bus. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was told that it might not be the safest thing to evacuate a bus quickly with 50 kids in seatbelts. I mean, is that sound right to you?
Sure. So, quite frankly, like anything, there's a number of school of thoughts. There's a number of opinions. There's many studies that have talked about school seatbelts on school buses. The National Highway Transportation Safety Office and the Maryland State Department of Education's Transportation Division have absolutely not been in favor of the use of seatbelts on school buses up until the waning days of the prior administration. So one official at National Highway Transportation Safety Office came out in favor of them. But the data before that has all been against the use of them. So you mentioned one. One is that if the youngsters are belted in, it could definitely delay the evacuation, either their self-evacuation or an assisted evacuation on a bus. So clearly you spoke to one of them. Another issue really has to do with the fidelity of the use of the seatbelt, and let me elaborate on that. So the seatbelt, if it's used properly, and by properly I mean it's properly fitted, it's properly buckled, it's properly worn, could it incrementally contribute? Potentially. But if it is improperly sized or worn, then it would have the opposite effect. So, for example, I'm a father of two. They're in college now, but I'm going back to my younger years. My kids were wiggle worms, I called them a little bit, right? So I always had to keep looking in the rear view mirror of my car to make sure that they had it on, that it was tightly across their lap and in a proper place. I had to adjust the height of it so it hit them right at the right place, etc. So we transport 59,000 beautiful children who are potentially beautiful wiggle worms too. And a bus driver at the front of the bus, in spite of their best efforts, cannot continuously ensure that every youngster in that bus has their belt on, has it on properly, hasn't moved, wiggled it somehow, isn't sitting sideways, etc., and that it's adjusted for each bus, because our buses are used 3 or 4 times at a minimum in the mornings, and then again they may be transporting pre-K kids, then high school kids, then elementary school kids, and so that continuous adjustment is problematic. And then finally, in a bus scenario where the bus may turn over either on its side or on its roof, there are many videos that have shown that that again, especially if improperly worn, that seatbelt actually can strangle, can create some extreme physical damage to a child if it is not absolutely. So in the state of the perfect, it's a net plus, but in the world of reality, you also have to be cognizant of the fact that there could be many downsides to it.
So you alluded to something, I guess last year when I was at the National School Boards Conference, I had spoken to someone who had mentioned that the federal government was not issuing an order that school buses needed to have it, but saying that it might be a good idea to start thinking about it. So is there any indication, I mean, I know it's very early, but I mean, is that something that you think will go away? Or, I mean, was that far enough down the food chain that might continue, or?
Well, I think like anything, it's a subject I mean, vehicular safety, the engineering of a vehicle, and I'm talking about everything, right? But specific to buses, I mean, vehicle safety, the engineering, it's continuously under analysis. I mean, it's under analysis by the regulators, it's under analysis by the industry that manufactures the buses, and it's under analysis by us, the end user who's purchasing and or owning or operating these buses. So it's sort of an evolving thing. Could we get to a point that seatbelts are mandated by regulation? It could, but that's sort of speculative. Currently, it's not. Again, an administrator at NHTSA came out with an opinion that they would be that in his opinion they would be beneficial and that they should be considered, but it's not a mandate or a requirement at the federal or state level. We know that each and every year in Annapolis, seatbelts is a subject of one, if not multiple, bills on either the House or Senate side. So it's a conversation that keeps rising, but at the moment, we're not in a position to prescribe the use of the seatbelts.
Okay.
We, as an organization, again, they'll monitor it all the time. We're in contact with state and federal folks to see what's the state of the art in terms of the thinking on seatbelts.
Thank you very much for that discussion on the issue.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to briefly piggyback on Mrs. Burge. Aren't some of the bills also encouraging us to put a 3-point harness seatbelt and a regular seatbelt on a bus depending on the size of the child? So a bus driver would then have to make sure like the 4 or 5-year-old is in a proper 3-point harness at each bus stop.
Yeah, so I mean, there have been bills in the past that would simply require a lap belt only, so it's a single. They are very problematic. There are bills that would require sort of a triangular seatbelt, more conventional to what you would see on a car today. And then there's bills that would require a 3-point harness that would be analogous to what you would see on a child safety kind of seat, with buckles in the middle and midriff as well. So there have been bills of all 3 flavors. Some of them indicate that they're simply applicable on a going forward basis. So a bus that's put into service as of January 1, 2018 or something like that. I've seen other bills over the years that say, no, there's no grandfathering. You have to go and do this to all existing buses. We've had conversations with the manufacturers of our school buses and the local school bus maintenance and repair contractors. They have, I can't even begin to express, they have grave concerns about trying to retrofit seatbelts into existing buses. A bus can be designed so the attachment points, of a seatbelt, again, in your car, those are hardened. I mean, they're engineered specifically to have those attachment points, to have the geometry of things to work out correctly. That's difficult, but doable on a new bus. It is beyond difficult, and I would say borderline impossible to do that as a retrofit on existing buses. And I am not really sure if the lawyers and who advise and the insurers that insure existing school bus operators and fabricators would even go along with that kind of concept. So discussions are ongoing.
Thank you. Mr. Grannon.
Thank you for that presentation, which was extremely informative and very comprehensive. I've got 4 questions, so maybe it's more efficient if I just say them all, and you can tell me whether you have the information now, and maybe some of them might require some follow-up. So the first is, you mentioned the fatality data. Is there any national data on injuries short of fatalities? Oh, thank you. Second, do you have any information on or data that you can provide to us on injuries here in the county as opposed to national data? Third is, I guess if you could just provide a little bit more color around why that one particular administrator was suggesting, I guess, a change of position going from no seatbelts to seatbelts. And I guess the second part is, are you aware of any large school systems that actually have implemented a requirement for seatbelts? And fourth, what are our protocols here in the county for reviewing accidents or other safety lapses? Thank you.
So take them in the order that you presented them. I today do not have national injury data, but I'm certain that we can get that. I also don't have local injury data, but I'm certain that I can arrive at that. So we can provide that under separate cover to the board. A little bit of color commentary of why the individual at National Highway Transportation Safety Board did that. I cannot, other than to say that it is largely a matter of opinion. So you and I, or you and your 9 colleagues, could look at a matter, the same exact matter, and you may have differences of opinion amongst you and your colleagues, or you and I can have a difference of opinion. So it was essentially an opinion that, based upon his review and analysis, he felt that they would be, on a net basis, beneficial. That is contrary, that is supported by some, that is also contrary by far many more. So, I mean, if you were to sort of take that polling kind of data, the amount of subject matter experts that would recommend against mandating seatbelts by far exceeds the number of subject matter experts that would be in favor of them.
That was only one of several administrators, so kind of necessarily a minority view.
If you looked at the numbers, it's certainly a minority or sort of dissenting opinion. It is. Large school districts, so no, I don't have a list of them. We follow the school news rags, trade rags pretty judiciously, so there are school districts across the country that do require them. There's school districts that have required them and since stopped requiring them, and there are the vast majority simply don't require them. Though the numbers of school districts that did implement and then backed off of it, a lot of it had to do with liability considerations. So once the seatbelts were put in place, there was a recognition of the liability of having a seatbelt on the bus and yet not being able to a high degree of certainty and fidelity ensure that it was being worn properly, sized properly, etc., and that the risk management and sort of the legal advice given to them in some cases was, you're possibly doing more harm than good. You're possibly putting yourself in a more libelous or adverse risk position, and you're doing that of your own volition. You're voluntarily entering into an arena that's not required, so it's not codified by either state or national law. You're doing this voluntarily, which again exposes you to a greater level of risk. So there are ones that are doing it, absolutely. There's ones that have forayed into it and then backed out of it for various reasons. And then again, the vast majority simply do not mandate seatbelts in their school buses. Your final question had to do with safety. So yes, we have an accident review board here in the county. It's not just county officials. The police department sits on an accident review board as well. It's a very structured process. If a driver is in an accident, the driver is immediately removed from driving, so the driver cannot drive until they go through the driving review, to the accident review panel. And then the accident review panel obviously has a number of recommendations. I mean, it can be a no-fault, non-preventable. So there's degrees, essentially, of an accident, everything from not preventable, inconsequential, all the way down to very consequential, preventable. And so the remedies for those differ. They're sort of disaggregated. They could involve supplemental training. They could involve suspensions. They could involve certifications. We, each and every year, do in fact decertify drivers, and when a driver is decertified, we're the certifying entity. So when a driver is decertified, they're not just decertified to drive a school bus for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. They're decertified to drive a school bus in the state of Maryland.
Mr. Gilliland?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for this presentation, for being the stand-in guy. You did a heck of a job. So, I know Mrs. Burge already asked my seatbelt question, and others elaborated on it, so I won't go there. Two additional questions. One, I think is probably just very brief, and that is special needs buses. Do all of those have a bus aid to support the driver?
Yes. The answer to that essentially is yes, and let me just loop back to a comment that Ms. Burge indicated earlier. So those buses, the way they're engineered, depending on the needs of the youngster. So youngsters have various wheelchairs or adaptive equipment, etc. So the harnessing and safety systems in those buses are not generic. There's not one way to safely lock down and immobilize a wheelchair or other adaptive device. So when a youngster comes to us, we have a team both from the special education office and from the transportation office that work with that child, work with that family, gain an in-depth knowledge of what type of adapted or adaptive device that youngster might be utilizing or require, and then the buses that are designed to transport those youngsters have the capacity of having the restraint figures configured in different ways so that they align with the mechanical piece of equipment or manual piece of equipment that child might be using. So there are bus aids on those buses, and then the buses themselves are differently configured because they require a different adaptive capacity to them.
Right. Understood. And again, the reason behind the question was just to ensure the driver can do what he or she needs to focus on, and some support can be there for other.
Right, and it's not just an aid, so it can range from an individual aid to multiple aids. So the number of aids that are on a bus, again, are calibrated to not just the number of youngsters, but more specifically to the types of supports that those youngsters would require.
Thank you for that. Second question, and it's probably a deeper question, understanding that some of this may be out of the scope of your area, but when there are issues, and they're certainly related to safety, but behavior-related issues, certainly, driver has the long mirror above them, he or she's looking up at the mirror, at some activity that may be occurring, front of the bus, back of the bus, wherever, and certainly it's a distraction. How are there protocols or procedures even for dealing with an unruly bus?
There absolutely are. So our drivers received training on that. We receive a tremendous amount of support from the building level administrator as well. So depending on what the situation is or what the infraction is, et cetera, so the bus drivers are equipped to handle certain things on their own. When it rises to a level that it might involve discipline, a code of student conduct, anything like that, there is a referral system that the bus drivers utilize. Typically in most buildings, a building principal, if it's not a building that just has one, typically will assign NAP, et cetera, as one of their duties to transportation. So the bus drivers build up a rapport with the administration and can convey that information. A bus driver cannot discipline a student. That is up to the administration of the school. So we will provide the information, the data, et cetera, and then there's a very structured way that a principal and an assistant principal and their admin team will either deal, counsel, or discipline a student.
And in some cases or certain cases, I'm sure it's all a case-by-case judgment call that needs to be made. Are bus aids available to support drivers if and when there's a situation that warrants their presence on a standard bus?
There are bus aids that are on buses that are not special ed adaptive buses as well? So the answer to that is yes. I mean, obviously, the amount of aids we have is limited by budget, right? But there are aids that are put on buses. There are many aids that are put on buses that are not the lift buses per se.
Are there any public comments on this?
Good afternoon, board. Lisa Van Buskirk with Start School Later again. When we talk about bus safety, usually Start School Later is looking through the lens of student safety. Today I'm going to turn the focus to the driver safety, and specifically the healthy and alert bus drivers discussed in the presentation. Adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So if the bus drivers are waking up to get to their buses in the 4 o'clock hour for the over 24 buses that are picking up students for magnet and special needs programs before 6 a.m., are those bus drivers asleep by 8 or 9 o'clock, depending on their individual needs? Now, granted, adults don't have the same kind of sleep cycles that students do, so they ought to be able to fall asleep at 8 if they're getting up at 4. But if they do not, then they are potentially creating an environment of drowsy driving and putting their students at risk. As I've testified before, drowsy driving is considered by experts to be akin to drunk driving. So safe school hours for students will also mean safer school hours for bus drivers. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Janet Norman, Annapolis High, Annapolis Middle parent. So I thought it was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Mr. Steknovich, for pointing out the safety features and what's contributing to accidents. The thing that really struck me in his testimony was that 58% of fatalities were while a student was driven by another teenage student. So what we really want is we want more of our AACPS students on your buses because it's the safest place to be. If any of you venture down here on Riva Road at 7 a.m., when sleep-deprived students are rushing to get into that Annapolis High parking lot, and Riva Road's a dangerous road to begin with all the turns and exits and stuff. We don't want early school hours that are putting more kids into private cars. My son has driven 720 days of his high school experience. 720 days you have put my son and so many others onto the road, another car on the road because your buses come crazy early. He would have to get out of the house at 6:17 a.m. for an 8-hour day of calculus, physics, IB history, everything else. And he doesn't have to leave the house until 6:55 a.m. if he is driven every day. So many other students are opting out of the bus because it gives them an extra 20, 30 minutes of sleep. You're putting so many more cars on the road. You're sending your buses out in fleets rolling at 5 a.m. when they have not heard back road conditions. You've had buses skid off the road. You had an emergency room physician came in and testified last year when he thought it was an extremely bad call by the school system to be putting students out on icy roads. And he let Dr. Arlotto know that. You are not getting the proper feedback on road conditions because you're sending the buses out so early. So we want you to fill the buses. We want our students to be safe. If 10.5 students are dying per year driven by other students, how many students are being injured each year? How many accidents are happening? Another classmate of my son's hit the back of a teacher's car on the very first day that he had his license. And they're hitting other cars on Riva Road. You're all paying for the insurance rates in this area. You're all being charged for all these accidents and safety problems. So I urge you to make it safer for everybody, reduce the number of cars on the road by getting students out of private cars and into your safer buses. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, 5.02, award of contracts. This is a review item. Are there any board questions or comments? Are there any public comments on these items? All right. We'll move on to action items. Item 6.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the personnel listed on the attached sheet be promoted and or appointed.
So moved.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 6.02, personnel. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Hummer?
I just want to do a shout out to one of our teachers that retired as of December 1st. Ms. Como taught at Brockbridge Elementary for almost 37 years, and she literally taught multiple generations of the same family. She was teaching the grandchildren of some of her first children, and most of the time there she taught 5th grade. So she was kind of a standing fixture at Brockbridge, and she will be missed.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Next, we have 4 policies up for second reading. These are review or information items. Policy item 6.03 is policy DA, financial management goals, and there were no public comments during the 30-day posting.
For the record, good morning, I think, good afternoon. Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Council. Correct, there were no public comments.
And when will this be brought back for a vote?
At our next board meeting on February 15th.
February 15th, okay. Are there any board questions or comments? Are there any public comments? Okay. Item 6.04 is policy GAE, staff conduct, distribution of materials and oral communications to or through students. And there were also no public comments during the 30-day posting.
Correct.
Any board questions or comments? Or any public comment? All right, so that we'll see that on the 15th as well.
Yes.
Item 6.05 is policy GAAA, strikes and refusal to work, also a second reading, and there was 1 public comment.
Yes, correct. We had 1 public comment during the 30-day public comment period, and as a result of that comment, we went back and made an amendment to better align the policy with state law.
Okay, so the draft language on page 1, section C, paragraph 2 was a result of that person's comment. Okay?
Yes.
Any public or any board questions or comment? Mrs. Sasso?
What was the comment from the public and, the little change that was made just for public record?
Yes, correct. The comment related to the time period for the board, the Anne Arundel County Public Schools, to make payroll deductions for an organization.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
We'll see that again on the 15th.
Yes, that will be on the 15th.
And the last of the 4 is National Association Meetings Policy GBN, second reading, also no public comments.
Correct.
Any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment? All right, then we'll see you on the 15th.
Yes, thank you.
Item 6.07 is the Board of Education handbook revisions. Mrs. Nally?
I would like to move that the Board of Education adopt the handbook revision.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Sasso?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to amend specifically the area that has to do with the graduation ceremonies. Second paragraph, for it to be able to read, at least 1 other board member must participate by being on stage. Board member attendance at graduation should be scheduled far enough in advance by informing the executive assistant in order that the appropriate logistics can be arranged.
And okay. And you're deleting a line as well?
Yes, I'm deleting the line that says other board members may choose to participate in the ceremony by being on stage. It's so they should make their intentions known.
So that gets struck, and then the language that replaces it will say at least one other board member must participate by being on stage. Board member attendance at graduation should be scheduled.
That's correct.
Okay. You still have your motion standing? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Second. All those in favor of adding this language into the handbook that we're voting on today? All right. Motion passes 9-0-0. Are there any board questions or comments on the overall handbook revisions? Is there any public comment?
Can I make one comment? And that is basically the board manual itself, for it to be on the website of the commission, so that basically any person of the public that is interested on being a member of the board for further elections or further appointments is aware of what it takes for a person to sit on a board. It's not just the 2 meetings that the board holds in public, but everything that takes place behind the scenes and all of the activities we must attend.
Mrs. Nally?
And I would agree with Mrs. Sasso. When I first came on the board, there was not a handbook, and I did the first handbook as a leadership project with Maryland Association of Boards of Education, with a lot of help from Molly Connolly and then attorney George Margulies, and we really worked on this, and we looked at handbooks around the state. We looked and we really studied it and started. Since then, there have been several, since we wrote this, there have been several revisions. And one of the things that has stood out in my mind has been exactly what Mrs. Sasso said. In my almost 10 years on the board, this board job can be 30 to 40 hours a week. And so I think people who are on the board should, or who are considering running for the board, it would be very helpful to have it on the commission's website so that they can look at it and really see what it entails. We have a separate handbook, student board handbook, and every few years the student board member looks at it and revises it to bring it up to date. And so I think that's important for the student handbook to also reflect the amount of time and what it takes to be a student board member. Thank you.
And we can certainly provide the link to the nominating commission, and we will still have it on the AACPS website as well. All right, all those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0. Item 6.08 is an information to action item, the Chesapeake Arts Center third-party project Makerspace. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? Second. All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Orlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the board approval of the Chesapeake Arts Center third-party project Makerspace.
Do I have a motion? I know we don't have a presentation. Do we have any board questions or comments? Mrs. Hummer.
So this is actually not coming out of school system funds. This is through the separate bonds that will pay for this?
For the record, Alex Checkno, Chief Operating Officer. Correct. So bond bills were passed to facilitate the bulk of the construction costs, not Anne Arundel County Public School operating or capital dollars.
So basically, we're granted that bond money to use?
Yes.
Okay. And can I just say, it looks fabulous. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a wonderful addition for the community and for the school. So thank you very much. It's going to be great.
For the good of the board, could you all introduce yourselves, please?
My name is Belinda Fraley-Huseman. I'm with Chesapeake Arts Center. I'm the executive director.
Would you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
My name is Belinda Fraley-Huseman. I'm the executive director of Chesapeake Arts Center.
Greg Stewart, Senior Manager Planning.
I have to say I had the chance right before the holidays to go to OpenWorks in Baltimore, which is a makerspace as well. And if you don't know what a makerspace is or haven't seen one, I would have you Google OpenWorks and look at their website and all the pictures. It's sort of like a public workshop to go and work on projects of all different kinds. So very cool. I'm very excited to see it coming to Anne Arundel County. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? All right, motion passes 900. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.09 is also an information to action item, new course approval. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action?
So moved.
All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of this course effective immediately for implementation in the 2016-2017 school year.
Thank you. Second.
All right, no presentation. Do we have any board questions or comments? Immediate. Mrs. Hummer.
We're already teaching that. Where is this class being offered?
At Arundel High School.
At Arundel High School, and is the plan to expand it out?
It is, yes. The plan right now, the plan is really for these modules, which is a different way of doing things than we have in the past, so that students have an opportunity to really explore a variety of computer science opportunities, whether it be through programming itself or effective use of data collection and analysis and those kinds of things. So the first module that we would like to try at Arundel High School this coming semester, and again it's a 0.25, so it's not like starting tomorrow, or it didn't start yesterday. It's going to kind of fluctuate in the middle of this semester, so that students have an opportunity to really get in and give us feedback on how well it goes as far as all of the project-based learning pieces to it.
Because the board doesn't get to work with you two, and you are awesome every day, could you introduce yourself so they have names and faces, because you guys are doing all the hard work every day?
We wanted to jump right into it. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Skip Lee. I'm the Director of Curriculum.
Hi, I'm Deb Albert. I'm Coordinator for Career and Technology Education.
Mr. Gilliland.
I was just to lighten the mood, was going to, if it was April 1st instead of February 1st, I'd move to table this until the next meeting, but I guess you need it right away. So.
Is this intended to just be at the high school level?
For now it is, yes. And what we're really trying to do is increase those opportunities for high school students to get more computer science experiences. Of course, as our curriculum grows, we're embedding computer science experiences into already in the K through 2 new curriculum. It's being put in the 3 through 5 as well. So of course, as our students build in their capacity, these will have to change and grow in the future, because our students will outpace them. But that's why we want this modular concept. And we actually worked with businesses all of last year. We met once a month in the evening to talk about what were some of the main skills that students needed, and they actually identified and kind of give us an outline for some of these modules, are the most important ones to start with.
Great. Is there any public comment? All those in favor? All right, motion passes 900.
Thank you.
That's right. The next item on the agenda is 6.10, items of legislation. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, we now have an action item from the board, and we will let you do a presentation on all the items of legislation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel. Just as a background, the following bills are presented to the Board of Education for consideration. The first section contains bills on which the board is requested to take formal action. The second section contains bills for the board's information. A board position is not being requested on these bills at this time. The third section contains bills addressed by the board's legislative program adopted on November 2nd, 2016. Accordingly, no vote is needed, and staff will advocate for the board's interests in accordance with the 2017 legislative program. So under Section 1, we have 3 bills which are identical. House Bill 1, which was cross-filed with Senate Bill 230, and House Bill 65. Labor and Employment, Maryland Healthy Working Families Act. These bills require employers that employ 15 or more employees to provide employees with earned sick and safe leave that is paid at the same wage rate as the employee normally earns. The bill also sets forth other requirements for employers with 14 or fewer employees. These bills are an unfunded mandate with significant fiscal implications. They would apply to temporary employees, including substitute teachers. Under this bill, Anne Arundel County Public Schools and local school systems in the state would be required to provide sick leave for these substitute teachers at an increased cost to local school systems. The costs associated with this bill would require school systems to cut resources from other places in order to afford leave for these individuals who currently do not receive leave. Accordingly, we respectfully recommend that the board oppose this legislation as you did in 2016.
Do I have a motion to oppose? Is there any public comment on this particular bill? All right, all those in favor? All right, motion passes 9-0-0.
The second bill is House Bill 18, Task Force to Improve Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers Scores for Maryland Public School Students. This bill establishes the task force to improve partnership for assessment of readiness for college and careers scores for Maryland Public School students. It requires the task force to identify the best practices of local school systems, assess needs, design plans, and make recommendations. It requires the task force to submit a final report of its findings to the governor, the State Board of Education, and the General Assembly on or before December 31st of this year. The requirements set forth under this bill are already being addressed via other means. Specifically, the accountability measures identified in House Bill 18 are currently required under the Federal Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. Additionally, most of the members defined in the bill would not be able to complete many of the proposed requirements enumerated in House Bill 18. For example, many task force members could not assess how PARC affects the individualized education program and English language learner students. They could not determine curriculum resources, identified needs, review professional development support, technology needs, school schedules, or evaluate structures, amongst other items. Most of the individuals who would be assigned to the task force have very little or no background in any of the above referenced topics. We respectfully recommend that the board vote to oppose this legislation.
So moved. Second.
Is there any public comment on this bill? All those in favor of opposing? Motion passes 9-0-0.
The third bill, House Bill 40, State Retirement and Pension System, Funding Ratio Report, Market Value of Assets. This bill requires the Board of Trustees for the State Retirement and Pension System to submit a report on or before December 1st of each year to the Joint Committee on Pensions and the General Assembly on the funding ratio of the state retirement and pension system based on the market value of the assets. We believe that it is in the best interest of Anne Arundel County Public Schools employees and members of the state pension system that the General Assembly receive an annual report of the funding ratio of the several systems based on the market value of the assets. Such a report can empower the Joint Committee on Pensions and the General Assembly to take steps to maintain or improve the funding ratio. Accordingly, we respectfully recommend that the board vote to support this bill.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this bill? All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0.
The next bill, House Bill 75, entitled Education, Graduation Requirements, Fine Arts. This bill would make courses in computer science, multimedia, or computer programming eligible to earn a credit in fine arts in order to graduate from a public high school. Inclusion of computer science, multimedia, and computer programming undermines and dilutes the intended value of the fine arts component within public education. While media arts has been offered as a new component that would fall within fine arts, the distinction between media arts and this bill's proposed courses is significant. While technology can and should play a role in the delivery of a comprehensive artistic education, this bill suggests the inclusion of courses whose outcomes or curriculum are not based upon fine arts standards. Accordingly, we respectfully recommend that the board vote to oppose this bill.
So move.
Mrs. Hummer.
Can I just say that this is a ridiculous bill? Computer programming instead of over as a fine arts requirement. So yes, totally in opposition to that.
Haven't our math advocates been wanting to see computer science and computer programming as a math requirement? I see that more than I've ever heard of somebody asking it for it to be fine arts.
Yes.
Yeah, those conversations have been ongoing throughout the state with regards to both math and within career technology education.
Especially now that they have to take 4 years of math in high school to give computer science and computer programming to be a math option, not a fine arts credit.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0.
The next bill, House Bill 102, Anne Arundel County Board of Education Human Trafficking Awareness Pilot Program. This bill is a reintroduction from last year. It supports the worthy endeavor of providing human trafficking awareness to Anne Arundel County Public School students. As a school system, we welcome the additional resources that we would receive from this bill. However, the training and reporting requirements are unmanageable and a local administration issue under the domain of the school system. Training all school-based staff on this issue is an unfunded mandate that the school system cannot support at this time. Likewise, we would not be able to report on the effectiveness of the human trafficking program, as we do not have baseline data to demonstrate the current issue and subsequently show the change as a result of the program. As such, we support amendments to the bill which remove the training and reporting requirements. The sponsor of the bill has agreed to introduce the proposed amendments and actually introduce them at the Anne Arundel County delegation, which were incorporated into last year's bill. As a result, we respectfully recommend that the board support this bill with the amendments described.
Is there any public comment on this bill? Ms. Sasso?
I have a question about this amendment specifically. In human trafficking, is this basically the awareness going to be made towards the teacher, the whole school? I mean, what is the emphasis of this?
Thank you for that question. So the intention of the bill is to provide Anne Arundel County Public Schools with materials and resources regarding human trafficking. As originally drafted, the bill would have required that we train our teachers on this issue with these resources and materials, and that they would provide this education and awareness to students. So the amendments we are proposing would take the training requirement and also the reporting requirement, because the original bill would have required us to report to the General Assembly sort of on the success or status of the program. So with our proposed amendments, we would remove the training and reporting requirement. However, we would still receive resources from the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention and Department of Mental Health and Hygiene. And so we would have those available at the schools for our students.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0.
The next bill, Senate Bill 1, Education Specialized Intervention Services Reports. This bill would require county boards of education to report information relating to the provision of specialized intervention services to the State Department of Education and the General Assembly on or before December 1st each year, and then to also publish this information on our websites. The requirements set forth in this bill would be burdensome because local school systems would be required to collect and report requested data. It would not see a benefit, as the bill does not actually provide for the use of the data collected to better assist the intended students. However, Anne Arundel County Public Schools supports creating a work group to further study this issue and identify best practices. So we propose that the bill be amended to establish such a work group. Accordingly, we respectfully recommend that the board support this bill with the amendments.
Is there any public comment on this bill? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. And those are all the ones to take a vote on today?
Yes, correct.
I have one card from Sarah Davis.
Hi, I'm Sarah Davis. I am a parent of multiple students with disabilities in Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I'm also the treasurer of our CCAC and a member of Parent Advocacy Consortium, an organization that supports students with disabilities. There is a bill that we did not discuss today, HB 0174. It is the IDEA parental consent bill. It'll be coming before the legislature for the second time this year. It is coming before them with amendments, so some of the items that would be requiring parental consent have been changed. And in this case, it's for inclusion of restraints and seclusion on a plan, for change of placement, and for removal from the diploma track. Those would be the three very narrow items that would require parental consent. And as a parent of students with disabilities, I would just like to urge the Board of Education to strongly consider supporting this bill. Inclusion of consent really sparks conversation at the IEP table. It allows everyone to get their views out there and ensures that any issues that become issues of contention are really talked through and obtain the attention that they deserve. What often happens at the IEP table where consent is not a feature is the school-based members of the team will unilaterally make a decision and present the parents with a take us to court if you don't like it approach. And what that does is it pushes those decisions that really should be made by the people who know the student most, the school-based professionals who have the educational expertise, and the parents who have the expertise on the student. It pushes them out to people who do not know the student. It creates huge economic burdens on both the school system and on the parents to participate in those dispute processes when those decisions really could often come to a mutually agreeable position if additional conversation was had. As a parent who's participated both in IEP team meetings where consent is required and where consent is not required, collaboration is greatly improved in those settings where consent is required because it creates an equal footing. The school system has the resources to take a parent to court. Parents often do not have those resources. As the mother of 5 children and on a single income military income, we don't have those resources. So when that door closes where we're told take it to court or live with it, and we strongly feel that the decision being made is not appropriate for our student, then we're faced with a very unpleasant situation. And anyway, I see my light is on, so I'll conclude. But I strongly urge the board to really consider the true implications to the communities, to the parents, and most importantly to the students who are at stake in these decisions. These are students who are being placed in restraints, which I don't think really affects Anne Arundel County because I don't believe you guys use that methodology, but who will be taken off the diploma track, which will change the course of their lives. Those students will not receive the same type of education as students on the diploma track. And students will be placed often in a more restrictive placement, so they'll be taken out of their home schools and placed in another school. These decisions merit the opportunity consent will give for collaboration and coming to unified decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gilliland?
I just wanted to ask, I didn't catch the bill number. Ms. Davis?
HB 0174.
Thank you.
That will be going to hearing on 2/9, so very short.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask, Jeanette, if you could just basically watch that bill?
Yes, so we are tracking that bill. It's been assigned to staff for comment and recommendation, and we will have it to the board for the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.11 is lease addendums. This is also an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? Bless you.
Bless you.
We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of the attached lease addendums.
I know we don't have, or do we have a presentation?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. Could you introduce yourselves for us?
For the record, Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer. Your name.
Linnell Bowen, Maryland Hall for the Creative Arts.
Louis Biondi, Goshen Farm Preservation Society, Incorporated.
Belinda Fraley, Huseman Chesapeake Arts Center.
I don't have any board questions or comments about this particular lease addendum. Do you all have anything you would like to say as our public?
I would. I've brought copies of the testimony for the board. I want to make it brief, but let me start by saying I'm president of the Goshen Farm Improvement Association. President Gorbelek, member of the board, Dr. Arlato. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the issue of the addendum. Since several board members may not be familiar with Goshen Farm, I was going to provide, but in the interest of time, it seems like long mornings journey into afternoons, to paraphrase. I won't read the whole testimony. You will have it. Probably the most important thing is for me to briefly say that since we have established our educational outreach program, we've dealt with about 1,500 students at Goshen Farm. And they range from working with students from the Environmental Literacy Signature Program, Advanced Placement Botany and Science Program at Broadneck High School, Stream Restoration Project at Broadneck High School and Southern High School, the Enclave Training Program, the Performing and Visual Arts Signature Program at Annapolis High School. I encourage you all to go to our website and see Victoria Garbasi's historic reenactment that was done as part of the PVA program. The Green School Program at Cape St. Clair Elementary, English as a Second Language Program at Anne Arundel Community College, the Environmental Sciences classes at Anne Arundel Community College, the Midshipman Action Group at the U.S. Naval Academy, the St. Andrew by the Bay Summer Camp Program, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service internship program. While you're at our website, I encourage you to see Dr. Arlato's interview at the 2-hour visit he spent with us at Goshen Farm, where he said that Goshen Farm, for us as a school system, is a resource. He went on to say that Goshen Farm brings a lot of resources together: environmental, cultural, historical, providing opportunities to students. He wrapped up his comments by saying it's an oasis in the middle of development on the peninsula and needs to be well preserved. The addendum to this lease will allow us to continue our preservation and restoration efforts, and as importantly, our educational outreach to continue to serve the Broadneck Peninsula and the students and residents of Anne Arundel County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments on this item? All those in favor?
Shall we? We support this.
Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor? All right, motion passes 900. Thank you. So I just have a couple of announcements before we move back into closed session. The first is that the new Board of Education meeting is the next Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, February 15th at 10 a.m. We have a Board Budget Committee meeting 1 hour after the conclusion of that meeting on February 15th, and then we have our Board Policy Committee meeting on February 22nd at 1 p.m. Mrs. Hummer.
I move that we go into closed session to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, this portion of the meeting is adjourned. We're back in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you.